Have you ever wondered why the quietest man in the room commands the most attention? There's a reason her eyes keep drifting back to the one who says the least. It's not his charm. It's not his words. It's the silence. Thick, weighted, magnetic. The kind of silence that doesn't seek permission to exist. The kind of silence that says, I am whole without you. In a world where noise begs for validation, your stillness becomes sacred. And she feels it, even if she pretends she doesn't. Even if she walks past you with feigned indifference, arms crossed in performance. Deep inside, her psyche registers something ancient. You are not chasing, not pleading, not unraveling to earn her gaze. You are simply being, and in that being, you awaken something primal within her. Carl Jung would say she sees the reflection of her own animus, the masculine soul image, projected onto you. Not because you are loud, but because your silence creates space for her unconscious to speak. She doesn't fall for you the way she falls for others. She falls into you, into your unspoken certainty, into your emotional gravity. She starts to notice things she won't admit, like how your absence is louder than other men as presence, how your gaze lingers with no agenda, how your silence doesn't feel empty, but full, as if every unspoken word has already been chosen, refined, and shelved behind your eyes. She'll test you, of course. She'll poke at your stillness, try to stir a reaction, not to break you, but to feel something immovable. She doesn't want to dominate your attention. She wants to feel safe in your resistance. And when you do not flinch, when your silence holds, her subconscious starts to whisper, he's not ignoring me. He's watching me. He's not silent because he's lost. He's silent because he's found. And suddenly, the man she couldn't read becomes the man she can't forget. She begins to orbit you, not always physically, but energetically. In conversations, her voice softens when you speak, even if you only say a few words. Her laughter bends slightly in your direction, hoping to pull more out of you. She starts to mirror your pauses, to lean into your stillness without understanding why. This is not manipulation. This is magnetism. You have become the unknown, and nothing captures the feminine like mystery. In the deep architecture of attraction, chaos does not long for more chaos. It longs for structure. The feminine, at its core, seeks a container, not one made of dominance, but of unwavering calm. When you withhold noise, when you choose not to spill your soul at the first invitation, you become the embodiment of the sacred masculine, the temple in which she can finally rest her storms. But her ego resists. It whispers warnings. He's too cold, too distant, too unavailable. Yet her body betrays the lie. Because this isn't emotional abandonment, it's emotional mastery. You are not silent to punish. You are silent because you are at peace. That difference is everything. She won't tell you, but she watches the way you carry solitude like a crown. She's drawn to how little you require from others to feel alive. And she begins to imagine what it would feel like to be the woman who gets inside that silence, who gets to hear the voice you rarely share, the thoughts you rarely reveal. This is how obsession begins, not with words, but with restraint, not with attention, but with absence. She's not falling for your affection. She's falling for your discipline. And in the quiet, she begins to unravel, not because you've pulled her in, but because she's never met a man who could stand still while the world begged him to move. Something shifts in her. The conversations she once craved now feel shallow. The men who once entertained her now seem loud, eager, performative. Because once a woman has tasted true masculine silence, the kind that doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't collapse, she can no longer be satisfied by noise. She begins to ask herself questions she can't quite voice. Why do I think about him when he's not around? Why does his stillness make me feel exposed? Why do I want to be seen by the man who isn't even looking for me? The answer lives in the unconscious, in the archetypal truth she never learned to name. In Jungian psychology, what she's responding to is not your personality, it's your presence. She is falling for the part of you that feels immovable, the part of you she cannot control or predict. You've become the symbol of something deeper, the self she hasn't yet individuated. The masculine force her own femininity secretly seeks, not to tame, but to touch. And so she shifts her behavior. Slightly, subtly. She replies faster to your rare messages. She lingers longer in the spaces where you appear. She shares more, hoping you'll offer just a fraction of your internal world in return. And yet, you don't. Not because you're playing a game, but because your silence is not a tactic. It is who you've become. You've learned that not everything requires a response, that your energy is a currency, that a man who speaks less often holds more power when he finally does. She notices, not just in what you say, but in what you don't, in your refusal to explain yourself, in your absence of emotional neediness, in the way you look at her like you see straight through her armor and then choose not to speak. It unnerves her. It undresses her without touch, and it keeps her awake at night, wondering if she's imagining it all, or if she's slowly falling into something she can't control. She begins to romanticize your silence. Not the kind of romanticism that lives in fairy tales, but the dangerous kind, the kind born in the shadows, in the spaces between words, in the ache of not knowing. You become less a man and more a mirror. And what she sees in that reflection isn't comfort, it's confrontation. You've disrupted her pattern. She's used to men giving too much too soon. She's used to texts that beg for attention, compliments laced with desperation, presence diluted by performance. But you remain still. Not cold, not cruel, but sovereign. And that sovereignty strikes her deeper than any compliment could, because you are not playing to win her. You are playing to keep your soul intact. And that changes everything. Carl Jung spoke often of projection, the mind's tendency to cast its own unresolved truths onto others. And when a woman begins to fall for a man's silence, what she's really experiencing is a return to her own disowned parts. Your stillness becomes a container where she meets her own longing, her own vulnerability, her own chaos, without you having to say a word. That's the paradox. The more silent you are, the more she reveals. The more still you remain, the more movement happens within her. She may talk more, dress differently, reach out in little ways just to confirm you're still watching. She won't call it attraction, not yet, because attraction implies power, and you haven't given her any to hold over you. But deep down, she knows. She knows something sacred is happening. Because your silence doesn't reject her, it calls her upward. She starts to crave your approval without asking for it. She begins to edit herself in your presence, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Because something in her recognizes, you are not like the others. You will not be one with softness alone. You will only open to the rare woman who meets you in depth. And that is the most seductive challenge of all. Soon, her attempts to provoke you soften. The tests turn into invitations. The cold silence she once weaponized with others becomes pointless with you, because your silence is not reactionary. It is sovereign. It does not bend. It does not bite. It simply is. And in that unshakable presence, she finally begins to feel something unfamiliar, safe. Not in the way she feels with someone who always agrees, or someone who endlessly praises her, but in the way one feels when standing before a mountain, vast, ancient, unmoved. Your energy does not demand her, but it invites her. And that, for a woman who has spent her life protecting herself from the volatility of men, feels like a kind of home she forgot she was searching for. She might not admit it out loud, but her entire nervous system begins to attune to you. She breathes differently when you enter the room. Her body softens in the silence, because in that silence, there's no performance, no need to prove, to entertain, to compete. Just presence, just being. This is where the deeper layers of attraction begin. She doesn't want the man who validates her every move. She wants the man who sees her fully and still withholds his world. Not to punish, but to preserve. Not to manipulate, but to protect what is sacred. Your silence becomes sacred. A temple she tiptoes around with respect. A language she hasn't learned to speak, but desperately wants to. And in her attempts to understand you, she begins to understand herself. You've become the mirror she didn't know she needed. A mirror that doesn't distort. It simply reflects, with brutal clarity and unshakable calm. And this is what she truly falls for. Not your attention, not your charm, but your ability to remain centered, even when she tries to pull you off balance. Because the man who cannot be moved becomes the one she cannot forget. And in the end, it's not your silence that haunts her. It's what it made her feel. Exposed, curious, humbled, desired in a way that had nothing to do with flattery and everything to do with presence. Because a man who moves in silence isn't seeking applause. He isn't looking to be chosen. He is the chooser. And that truth rattles the very core of how she's been taught to love. For most of her life, she's been adored by those who gave too much, too fast, Men who mistook attention for intimacy, reaction for connection. But you never gave her anything you didn't mean. You never forced your way in. And because of that, she starts to realize something she may never tell you, that she became better because of your distance, more feminine, more conscious, more in tune with her own chaos, and her deep craving for a man who does not try to fix it. Carl Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And so, she is transformed by your restraint, by your discipline, by the elegance of your absence. She doesn't beg for your love. She doesn't demand your words. She learns that to sit in the presence of a powerful man means she must first confront her own power. And perhaps, in some quiet, aching way, that was the gift all along. Because in the end, it's not the loudest man who stays in her memory. It's the man who gave her space to hear her own soul speak. The man who never chased. The man who never needed to convince. The man who stood still, even as everything around him moved. She will remember you, not for what you gave her, but for what you made her discover. The man who knows his worth doesn't chase, he chooses. If this spoke to something deep in you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe, and join the men waking up to their power.